Good afternoon, and welcome to Everybody, the podcast which shares stories that highlight people in life that make the world an interesting place, which ultimately ties us all together in unique and wonderful ways. And who am I, you might ask? I would be the head wrap socialite, wife, mom, micro-influencer in the fashion and etiquette world. But on this podcast, I will be introducing you to some people who I've had the opportunity to meet along my journey, who have helped enrich me in my life in beautiful ways, and who I hope will do the same in yours.
I left and I went to meet Harry. It was in the same town. And I knocked on the door and I had on jeans and a white Oxford shirt.
I love that.
And he opened the door. You know what he was wearing?
In my head, I know exactly what he was wearing.
Jeans and a white Oxford shirt.
Yes. It was meant to be. It was meant to be.
So then we went out to eat. We went out and got ice cream at this place in downtown Ann Arbor and sat on a bench or something, on the street, just chatting. And then I went home and then we started dating.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Good afternoon, and welcome to today's episode, where I have the privilege of introducing you to someone I've known for over 20 years, Dr. Sherry Jester. When we first moved to Rochester, I met her and her beautiful family because our husbands are colleagues. Cher is a trained pediatrician who made the choice to stay home with her children. She is a humanitarian and an advocate of hope for refugees within our community. With boundless generosity, she dedicates her time and her talent to spread light, peace, and love. Join me as I chat with my friend, Dr. Sherry Jester, whom I call Cher. Welcome to today's episode.
Thank you, Trina.
You're welcome. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are?
I am the youngest of 6 children, but I'd like to clarify that I share that position with my twin sister. So although I'm the youngest, I don't fit the youngest profile. Others might argue. So I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters, all older than me. When I was a child, we moved a lot because my dad worked for a refrigerated warehouse company and he would get promoted each time he would move. But then we ended up in Michigan when I was really young, until I finished first grade. And then we moved a couple more places and we ended up back in Michigan when I was 12. So I consider myself a Michigander, though I wasn't born there. And I'm a lover of the Great Lakes because I'm from the Michigan area. I went to college and then I was working for a while in research and I wasn't sure I wanted to do that. In fact, I was sure I didn't want to do that. Then when I was in college, I decided it wasn't a good time for me to take the MCAT. And so I thought, well, I'll work in research for a while and see. And then I did, and I hated research. I worked in one lab for about 9 months and it was horrible. I was the only person in his lab. And anytime something didn't work out, it was my fault. And so it was not good. But that's where I met Harry. He used to come use my pH meter.
Okay, can we digress for a little bit? So tell me how you and Harry ended up meeting.
So I worked in this lab.
Okay.
We were in this old building at the University of Michigan where it was all laboratories. It had been converted and all the rooms were laboratories. And there was like 1 or 2 or 3 laboratories on each floor and it was like 3 floors. I would be in my lab, because I was the only one that worked there.
Right.
And he was a work study student in a different lab because I graduated from college a year before he did.
Okay.
And he would come to my lab to use the pH meter and he told me that his pH meter was broken, which in retrospect, I learned it was not.
Great move, Harry.
And then we used to go out to lunch with other people from the lab, his lab. And we used to just walk out and go to Subway. And that was when Subway was new, way, way long time ago. And so that's how we met. And I got my master's degree in education and I was going to be a high school chemistry teacher. And I was all set to do that. I just didn't ever get certified. because instead I started medical school.
Oh my goodness.
So I did student teach chemistry.
Can I ask you though, what inspired you to become a pediatrician?
I always wanted to be a doctor since I was about 12. Actually, in high school, when you have to go interview somebody, I went and interviewed a NICU doctor.
Oh, wow.
And my mom thought that would be great if I was a NICU doctor, but that's not what I ended up being. By then, I was in my late 20s, and I knew that I wanted to have my children more than 2 years apart because I wanted them to be a little more self-sufficient before a new baby appeared. That was just from observing my siblings and their children. And I decided to have a baby during medical school, and we had a baby right away. And we were planning on my mother helping with the baby. And then as soon as I got pregnant, she got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And 7 months later, she died. And 3 weeks later, I had my first baby.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty stressful. And that was my first year of medical school.
Wow.
And then he was in the NICU for a week. And he came home with me and Harry. And Harry's mother stayed and helped with the baby for a couple of weeks. And then I went back to school on Thursday after he was born on Saturday. I did my second year of medical school over 2 years because at that time I was married. My husband was starting his residency. My mother just died and I just had a baby. So they allowed me to split my second year into 2 years. So it took me 5 years to graduate from medical school. But that put us both on the same timeline. So he finished his residency and I finished medical school around the same time. And then we ended up in Virginia at 2 different programs. And that's a really long, sordid story. But I was in Richmond in the inner city and he was in Charlottesville and we lived in between. And I had the longer commute and I was on call before residency. Hours were restricted. So I would be on call every fourth night and my ER shifts would be 12 hours. When I did the ER. And it was pretty hectic because he was in a fellowship program and he was on call. I think he did it like a week at a time when he was in fellowship. And then that was a really rough 3 years. And I did not want to have another baby in that time. And then we moved to Atlanta and I took maternity leave for 6 months after I finished my residency program. I called it maternity leave. He was already, 6 years old.
Right.
7 years old, actually. And what was really funny was that I had interviewed for a job in April and I had turned it down because I didn't want to commute. And it was outside of the city and we lived in the city. And they found me by finding my husband. And then I interviewed with them and I took a job which was part-time and I would go to full-time when somebody went on vacation or something like that. Wow. It ends up I worked 75% time over 3 years. And so I did that commute, which was the opposite, of the most traffic, but it could be harrowing at times. So I worked 3 years as a general pediatrician. And I loved it. I worked in the best practice I could ever imagine. And everybody got along, the doctors, the nurses, the staff, everybody. There was no backbiting or anything. It was just a wonderful experience. And I would have stayed there, but my husband wasn't happy with his job. And so he was looking for a job. And in the meantime, we were trying to have our second child. And I couldn't get pregnant. And so ended up going through infertility treatment, which was another harrowing experience, as anybody who's been through infertility treatment can tell you. So I got pregnant.
Did you decide be a stay-at-home mom? When did that shift happen?
So we moved to Atlanta in January of 2002, and I was pregnant with Audrey, who was born in March. And another funny story about that, but we moved here and we moved into an apartment because our house, when we had got the contract on our house, it was a spec house and it wasn't done yet. It wasn't supposed to be done till April.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And she was due on March 12th. And so that was supposed to work out. So I didn't want to work when when I first moved here because I had like 4 days of maternity leave when I had Kenny, and then I had 6 months off when he was 7 years old. And so I was going to take 6 months off for my maternity leave. And I did take 6 months off. And after 6 months, I started looking for a job. Okay. And we live on the north side of town. And the only job I could find was in Albert Lea. Oh. It was an hour-and-a-half commute, and it would be call every 5th day. Oof. And I'd have to live in Albert Lea when I was on call. And at that time, Harry was on call 50% of the time. And that just wasn't tenable. I had a 10-and-a-half-year-old and a newborn. And I was just like, that's just not going to work. And so I did not take that job. And then about a year later, Olmsted and Mayo were both hiring, but they both wanted full-time. And Olmsted would not even interview me. Mayo interviewed me, but then when I said I wanted to be part-time, they weren't interested. Big process to get approval for a hire. Correct. So they weren't interested in me. And so now she was 18 months old, and then he would have been, like 12-ish. And he was starting to play some more travel soccer and things like that. And Harry was still on call every other week at that time. And he wanted to play travel soccer and travel hockey. And I didn't want to work full time because I had just burned out on that when I was a resident because of all the childcare disasters. And so I didn't want to do that. But I didn't need to work for financial reasons. If I needed to work, it would have been in, academic reasons, like challenge my mind kind of thing. So I decided not to go back, but I kept up my credentials, my board certification and my licensure for many, many years with the intent that I could go back. Correct. And after a while, I felt too rusty to go back. Remembering how to dose amoxicillin. That's a stretch there. And so I just kind of fell into it. It wasn't like a conscious decision. I mean, it is, right? But it's conscious decision not to look for a job. Right. Do you ever look back and wish that you were practicing? Sometimes. Less so now, because now I'm like, old enough to retire early. Or old enough to be my sister. I'm old enough to retire early. There you go. So, yeah, I mean, yes, but I have been very busy. Stay-at-home mom, you're hardly ever at home. You're not at home. And the thing I wish more people would recognize is that stay-at-home moms are a huge support in the community. We do a lot of things that working parents don't do or can't do. Correct. Or don't have the time to do. Correct. And I think that's rarely acknowledged. I would say it again for those in the back. Share. Who couldn't hear you? I mean, I've had volunteer positions 5 at a time, like that were long lasting, years lasting. Yep. So, yeah, different things. I agree. It's like I think stay at home moms. A lot of times, you ask someone, they're like, "Oh, I'm just a stay at home mom." No, you're not just. Right. You are doing it. Right. And like you said, not only are you a huge part of the community, but you're a huge part of managing your home. Oh yeah. Without for sure. Without that, the wheels would fall off. But I think everybody has their calling, and to be a stay-at-home mom, it's a privilege. 100%, because not everybody can. I look at my kids now. And the ones who, are old enough, the 16-year-old, maybe not so much, but the 25, 22 and the 19-year-old, thank you, Mom, for staying home with us all those years. My son said that when he was in middle school. Wow. Zion, get on the program, please. But I had been working until he was 10 years old. 10, a little more than 10. So he knew. Yeah. Yeah. Although I worked part-time. Right. For those 3 years when he was 7 to 10. But I was able to do things like go to the school and do things with the soccer team. But when we moved here and he was in middle school, I don't remember if it was 6th grade or 7th grade, but he actually thanked me for staying home. And it's like, who does that?
Right.
So-
That's like one of those moments where you just hold in your heart
Right.
and just
Right.
say, my child can recognize,
Right.
you know.
Because he's seen it. He saw it when I was on call every
That's it.
fourth day.
He saw the other side of it.
Yeah.
How did your experience as a pediatrician influence how you raised your children?
Well, I remember one time, my kids are fully vaccinated for everything you can possibly be vaccinated for because I'm a pediatrician. But one time when Audrey was a baby and I had gone with Kenny and his class or something to a Twins game, and I came home and her breathing was really terrible and it sounded like she was whooping, but it didn't sound like croup. And it really sounded like it was more like a whoop. And I woke up Harry. It was like midnight when I got back because it was a Twins game. And I said, I'm really worried about Audrey. I think she might have whooping cough. And he's like, she's fully vaccinated. But if you're afraid, you just take her to the ER. And so I did. And she didn't have whooping cough. Who knew? But he always deferred any medical question to me. But I did a lot of, looking in their ears or if they had a fever. I was less paranoid mom because I never took them to the doctor unless I thought they needed to see a doctor. I'm a pediatrician. But fortunately, none of them were very sick after we moved here.
But can you tell us about your work as an advocate for refugees within our community? And then what inspired you to get involved in the midst of everything else?
Well, I was really busy being a volunteer in many ways at the kids' school. I was the PTA president for a while, and then I was on the board for many, many years. And I was a volunteer with the Breastfeeding Coalition, and I volunteered with the Suzuki organization. Anyway, I had all these volunteer roles, soccer, hockey. And I also was a volunteer with Family Promise, which was IHN at the time.
And what exactly is that?
They provide shelter for homeless families, churches within the community. And I was the coordinator at my church for like 3 years. So a lot of those things were kind of dwindling down. And I was at church, and Pon Lu from IMAA, which is the Intercultural Mutual Assistance Association, I think is what it stands for here in Rochester. She gave a presentation at our church. And my husband's like elbowing me saying, you would like that. You would like that. And so then I went and met with her. And I met with her in like October or November, and this would have been 5 or 6 years ago. And I sat with her for like 2 hours, and I talked about my background, and she said, I have this great family to match you up with because the mother's pregnant, and she's got 3 other kids, and one of them has special needs, and you would just be great. And so I did. I met up with her after the baby was born in January. And so at that time, the baby was like a month old. And she wanted help because the birth certificate had the wrong middle name and also the wrong gender, which she hadn't even noticed. So I helped her a lot with bureaucracy. I helped her get the kids enrolled in a different school. I was like the forms person. I saw that there was such a need for someone that comes to this country basically with nothing, especially not knowing the ropes, how our culture and society works. So that really touched me that people just are thrown in and don't have any idea how things work around here. And so I was helping her a lot, and then she moved to Bloomington. So I still help her, but very remotely and not as much. And I see her every few months or talk to her once a month or so. But her oldest now has graduated from high school and is in college. And then one of she sent back to Kenya to learn the Quran. And he's been over there for more than a year. So anyway, I got really involved with her family, and like she considers me family. And so she moved away, and I wasn't doing that anymore. And again, some of my other things had been dwindling down. And someone at my church asked me if I would coordinate a group for Catholic Charities, because Catholic Charities was doing this program where they were matching up different groups with evacuees from Afghanistan. These are people who were evacuated when everything went to pot.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not refugees, they're evacuees.
Okay.
They're a whole different status than a refugee.
Okay.
So I coordinated the group from my church, which I had about 15 other people that worked with me. And we were paired with a family that was a mother and a father who were approximately my age, a little bit younger, and had one child at home who was 17 at that time. And their other children were all over. One was in Iran, one was in Germany, and different places. They had like 5 or 6 kids, and they were all in different countries. One was here in the United States. So I was involved with that family, and I tried to help them find a job, and they didn't speak English. And so I had someone that was another evacuee that came and translated for us. So I was very involved with that family, and they were doing poorly trying to find a job because of their lack of English skills. So they decided to move to Albany. And they moved to Albany about a year after they had been here. Maybe a little, it was April, and they had come in August.
Okay.
And I helped them move to Albany. And now actually they moved to Indiana since then.
Wow.
And I've become friends with the family that was my translator.
Wow.
And I'm
Sherry.
like part of their family now.
I love
I
that.
went there to be the coach, if you want to call it a coach. The mom, they don't do that, what we do in Afghanistan, where the father goes and is with the mother while they're having the baby. And that was totally foreign concept to him. And he's like, well, who's going to stay with the 2-year-old? And then I said, well, I could stay with her, but they didn't think the 2-year-old would stay with anybody. So I went and I was there when the baby was born, and she had an emergency C-section. And so they brought me the baby.
Wow.
And then he came a couple hours later, and we traded places, and I went home with the 2-year-old.
Wow.
Which that was an adventure because she had never been with anybody else.
Oh my goodness.
But she knew me so well, it was no problem.
Right.
So
When you tell these stories, I reminded how, each of us are called to be there for another person. Part of what our calling is. You became a life preserver, a person who they could look to for guidance, for assistance, and for help. I can't imagine coming to another country not knowing anything,
right.
how the society works, how people move within in that part of the world, because every place is different, right?
Right.
But you extended yourself and you allowed them. I keep going back to you allowed these people to find out who they are, and you also allowed these people to have dignity as they were trying to find their way in society.
Yeah.
And just how beautiful is that? Because not a lot of people, Sherry, will do that.
Yeah, I know.
Not a lot of people, Sherry.
Yeah.
And thank you.
It's so fulfilling to me. I get as much out of it as I give.
Right.
I feel.
Right. Have you always been this type of person?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
Where do you think you learned it?
My mother. We used to, when I was, I'd say like late grade school, we would go to nursing homes and visit the residents, and my sisters and I would do little singing skits and things like that, like almost every week. Maybe it was once a month. I don't remember. Maybe my sisters remember how often we would do that, but I have a vivid memory of doing that. And I know when I was like 6, I must have been 5 or 6.
Right.
And we lived in the Detroit suburbs. And my mother had 2 children from the inner city come and stay like a week with us. So things like that. So I probably learned it from my mother, because I definitely did not learn it from my father.
Wow.
My father was not like that.
Right.
But I was close to my father, but.
But he was just different.
Yeah.
And those things that you carry that are a gift from your mother that she planted
right
in your heart and in your siblings' hearts, and you're still doing it, Cher.
Right. Well, and then I guess you could see adoption as a similar.
Would you like to share with the audience?
Well, I have an adopted child as well. So when Audrey was about 4, I didn't want to have my kids every 2 years. Yeah. Harry approached me about, did I think that we would want to adopt a child, because it would mostly be on me, as it has been, with Audrey. He was working a lot. And he had always wanted to explore adoption because his dad was adopted. And he kind of just felt he wanted to give back to the world in that same way. And I had always wanted 3 children. And I did not want to go through infertility treatment again. Right. So adoption was a good. So we figured out, we went to a program at the library about adoption from the organization in the Twin Cities. And like we went to that in October, and in November we were going to like a parenting. They had a 2-day like thing where you went one day and you like learned about, the different places. They call them different programs where they adopt from different countries. And you learned about, and we each went to 2, and we each went to 2 different ones so that we could compare notes. And then like by the winter we had a home study, and in May, it was May, we got referred a child, and we had to decide if we wanted to accept the child. We had filled out this form that delineated the different medical problems you would accept or not accept. And one of them was prematurity. And we had said, like, we'd consider it. It wasn't an automatic yes or automatic no. And this child was premature. And so, we looked at all of her information, and I discussed it with one of my colleagues from my previous job. And one thing we discussed was you never know what you're going to get when you have your own child. Right. So even though this child was premature and possible other problems, you never know what you're going to get. And a lot of her problems were NICU problems that once you graduate from the NICU, that's not a problem anymore. Okay. So I knew that because I'm a pediatrician. So I could read through all that and say, oh, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. So then a few weeks later, we said yes. And then that started the process. And then we went to get her in November. And she was just shy of 15 months old.
And where did you go?
South Korea.
Wow.
People are always like, did you adopt from North Korea? It's like, no, nobody can go to North Korea. So she was from South Korea. And since she was an older child, not real old, because she was still only a year old, they wanted us to meet with her a few times before we took her home. So we arrived on Friday, 9 p.m., and we just spent the weekend being tourists. Yeah. And then on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we met with her for a couple of hours. At first we had a translator and a social worker. They were the same person. And then the second day we had that. And then the third day we spent longer with her. And we also had time with the foster mother as well. And on the third day, we like had her on her own for like 2 or 3 hours. And we took her for a walk in the stroller and things like that. And then on the fourth day was Thursday, and we had to get up early. And then there was, I know there's one other child, there might have been 2 other children that were being sent out that day. And one of them was with an escort. And they sat everybody around the table, and the foster family was there, the mother, the father, and their 3 daughters. And the foster family of the other child were there, and we're in this all cramped in this conference room, and the foster mother's giving me formula and like all these things that she was supposed to give me the day before. And I'm like, how am I going to pack this stuff? But we're all sitting around this table, and they did a little prayer in Korean. We have a copy of what they said. And that was really cool because they blessed these children before they sent them on their way. And then the whole time the foster mother's holding her. And then we're getting in the van to go to the airport, and the escort gets in the van with her child and the way back. And then Kenny and Audrey get in, and Harry gets in, and it's like time for me to get in, and I still don't have the baby. I was like starting to be worried because I'm trying to get in this van, but I don't have the child yet. But then they gave her to me.
Sherry.
And she took her first steps in the Tokyo airport when we had a layover.
You guys were coming back to the U.S.
And the flight was mostly full of Asian people. And what was really interesting, the people behind us, they wanted to hold her. And I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And they would. And then there was a man sitting next to them across the aisle that had like a hood and over his head. And she looked over at him and she like started crying and reaching for me.
Oh, Sherry.
But like she knew to reach for me.
Yeah, she was like, you are my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was amazing because like we're white and everybody else on the airplane looks like everybody she's ever seen her whole life. So that was really interesting.
And it goes to show you love knows no color.
Yeah.
Love knows nothing but love.
Right. Right. So here we are.
And here we are. Wow.
And now she's a junior in high school. And
can you believe it?
No. It's crazy.
I remember when we would take the kids out, because at that time they were probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4, and we'd go walking or running, on the little path, and we'd park at the little park, and, now they're juniors.
Right.
Where did the time go?
I don't know.
Too fast.
Yeah.
But a beautiful journey.
Yeah.
Now, with all of this, Cher, how do you, my friend, balance your time? You're a mother, you're a humanitarian, and you also have other commitments within our community. But what do you do to bring balance to your life?
Man, that's a good question. I don't know. Well, Harry and I go kayaking a lot. Last year we went 50 times.
Oh my.
More than 50. We counted it up. I don't remember. It was more than 50. So that's a great thing because it's just very relaxing. I used to run or bike. Now I'll walk. Yeah.
Do you listen to music?
Not necessarily. I'm funny that way. I like silence.
Ah.
Like I can be in the house all day and never turn on the TV or radio or anything.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will, but hardly ever. And then Harry will come home and he'll turn on something and I'll be like, oh, noise.
Yeah. So I was just going to ask you, like, I know what it is about silence. I enjoy the silence of the silence, but what is it about silence that calls you?
Oh, I think it's because I can be in my own head, and I'm not distracted by other things.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's it. Because, yeah.
In your opinion, though, Cher, what are some of the most critical issues that you find within our communities that refugees or evacuees are faced with?
Well, food, jobs. I know that my refugee family friend, she has had a heck of a time finding a decent job. I mean, and she was very eager to work, but I don't know how eager she is anymore. And she had little kids. And how do you do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're working a very little pay job, and then there's childcare, but now her youngest is in school, so that helps. She worked at in center for a little while, and then she got asthma. She was in the painting area, and she got asthma, and she had to quit. And they didn't send her last paycheck. And I had to go to bat for her. I had to contact the labor board. I had to send the company a letter telling them I was contacting the labor board and that I would contact a lawyer if necessary before she finally got her last paycheck. That kind of thing. They get taken advantage of because they don't know. Like she wouldn't have known to do any of that. No. But I was like, that's not right. We got to figure this out. And because I think, they're easily taken advantage of.
That's it. And you think about how many people who don't have advocates in their corner.
Exactly.
Who they're like, you know what? You no longer work here. That's it. And you're like, I know I'm owed another 1 or 2 paychecks.
Right.
And they have no recourse. What are they going to do?
They don't know how.
They don't know how.
And I didn't know how.
Right.
But I knew how to find out how.
What can we do as a community? Like, what can I do? What can the listeners do?
I think that the number one thing that would help refugees in our community is transportation. They need a car. They need to know how to drive. And I know, there are buses and Uber. Uber costs too much, obviously. But even the bus system is not ideal. We don't have a great public transportation system in this town. And, when they lived in this apartment and they had to go to something downtown, they would take like 45 minutes or more to get there.
Wow.
Because they'd have to take one bus and transfer to another bus and wait for that bus. And they live 5 minutes away. I think that's the hugest barrier, and they'll share rides. Like when my friend worked in center, she would share rides with someone would drive that did have vehicle and did have ability to drive.
Right.
And she has both of those things now, which we helped her with. And I think that's a major thing because you need a car to get a job.
And with that, it becomes education too, because had, you had not have been there to help her with a job or getting the last paycheck or helping her with her driver's license and, car eventually, just think about where she would be.
Right.
Like the more things the better off you can do for yourself.
Right.
And these are all tools that we definitely need more people like you who will step up to the plate, who will help these people who are coming in. Because they're no different than you or I.
No, right.
They want the same things.
Yep.
They want a life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and to be able to do it with dignity.
Definitely.
What are some of the key lessons, Sherry, that you have learned about peace, hope, resilience, love that you've learned or encountered from the people that you've met?
Well, love is universal. It doesn't matter the color, the age, the occupation. Peace, I find it such a blessing that they could come here and find a peaceful place to live. I mean, when I've heard the story of the family from Afghanistan at the airport, how do they manage? They had a 1-year-old at that time, and they're trying to leave the country and worried about their lives, worried about their families' lives.
Yeah.
Hope. Hope. They have hope. They definitely have hope. Yeah.
As someone who spreads light and compassion, how do you find the strength and the motivation to continue your work even in the midst of challenging times?
Well, it gives me something to do, like that I feel is worthwhile. It fills my cup.
I think it's pretty cool too how you have become a page in their stories. They have become a part and a page in your story. And with that happening, I think when you they encounter other people, now they're able to be another page because somebody has given them that hope, that peace, that love, that understanding. And now they're able to spread it to someone else. I think the sooner that all of us recognize that and we step outside of our comfort zone, the world does become a much better place. I guess the last question that I have for you before we conclude is, how can we, within our community or even in the world, how can we support and contribute? And I think I may have asked this, but a different way, but how can we be better people? How can we support and contribute to the causes that you're passionate about? Is there a way that we can help?
I think the first thing is curiosity, because I have a huge curiosity about the world. And what drove me, I think, because I have never met a Somali family in all the time I've lived in Rochester until I met this family. And there's all kinds of Somali families. And I never felt comfortable, right? Because I don't know anything about their culture and I don't know anybody. But now, like, I'll see people in the elevator at Mayo and they'll say, "You're so-and-so's friend." And I'll be like, "Yeah,
that's me.
I am." Like I'm like a legend or something.
Yeah, you're the icon.
In the Somali community. I mean, I know there's other people, but it's not common. And it's hard to step out of your comfort zone, but that's the first thing is, and then you have to figure out what groups can help you do that. And the Catholic Charities in Refugee and Resettlement Program is a big one. And then IMAA here in Rochester is another big one. Usually when they come to the country, it's Catholic Charities that helps them for the first 6 months. And then they move into IMAA's realm. And IMAA has this program, and I was one of the first that they call a match program. And they match a volunteer with a family. Catholic Charities program with the Afghan evacuees, they would have a group that supported one family. But I think that like everybody would be happy to give, like pots and pans or kitchen towels or, use furniture, which is all great.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't get them a job. It doesn't get them transportation. And in order to have a sustainable situation, that's what they need.
That's what they need. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Looking ahead, what are your future goals for yourself as wife, mother, humanitarian? What do you
Well,
see yourself
I
doing?
haven't thought a whole lot about that, but I'm kind of like grandma now to this family.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoy that because I've been able to watch, they had a health crisis with their 2-year-old, and I was able to help them as they navigated through that. And she looks forward to me whenever I come because she thinks I'm her playmate.
Oh, Sherry.
And so I really enjoyed that. So I don't know that I'd necessarily become involved with another family just because I'm already involved with 2 families.
Right.
Just, plus I have my own family.
Yeah.
But I'm always doing something. I don't have anything right now that I'm thinking about, but
Right.
I'm always doing something.
I love it, Cher. I love it.
I want to tell you, too, another thing I forgot to tell you. So that first family that moved to Indiana, their daughter got married in January, and they invited every one of our group that helped them to come. And I was the only one that went. And so I went to the wedding, and I spent the whole weekend with the family in their home.
Oh,
and I did all of the traditional things, and they treated me like one of their own. I got the henna.
Oh,
and I got to go get my hair and makeup done, the bride, and I got to experience, they wear 3 different wedding outfits, the course. And so that was just fascinating to me. And the mother had made me a dress.
Okay.
And so I brought that and I wore that. And so that was cool. And then, and then I met their other daughter who lives in Indiana, and she has a baby and husband. And then I met the groom, and I got to know that family, and they invited me to the 1-year-old's birthday a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, I can't go all the way to Indiana for a 1-year-old's birthday, but it was so sweet.
That is really sweet, and you could see you touched their lives.
Yeah,
you made a difference in their lives. They consider you their family.
Right. So technically, I'm involved with 3 families.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And I've met different relatives, like the sons of the family that lives in Indiana now, on FaceTime, and the mother of the people that I see now. I meet him on FaceTime. The husband of the woman that lives in the Twin Cities, all on FaceTime. They always want everybody to meet me.
Oh, Sherry, even just hearing you talk about, not only when you talk about your family, but when you talk about these families that have become your family, your face just lights up. And I just keep staring at you you have this glow about you, and it's the glow of love. And there are people that you meet in this life, I believe, immediately you notice that there is something unique and different about who they are. And when I first met you and Harry, there's something about you two that drew me and my husband to your family. And it's funny because we say that little children can recognize that. My children recognize that in your family. And in this world, I don't know why we meet the people that we do or why they show up at the times that they do, but I know it's not a coincidence. And I am grateful that we met you guys. I am happy because you have no idea of how much of what you guys do influence how Jay and I and my children move within the world. Wow. And for that, I will be forever grateful. You are proof that we can all be agents of change and that our everyday actions can ripple outward, because you, Sherry, touch so many lives in such a profound way. Even in the midst of our careers and our movements of life, we are all called to search, to find, to understand what our calling is, what love note is written on our hearts. And It's been an honor to know you. It's been an honor for me to call you a friend. It's been an honor to sit across the table from you today. And as you're talking, my mind constantly flips back to the very first time that we met. And we have laughed together, Cher. We have cried. We have joked together. You are like a big sister, and grateful for you. I am really grateful for you. So I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to talk with you and to glean more of who you are. And yeah, you mean a lot to me, my friend.
You mean a lot to me too. Thank you.
Thank you, Cher.
It's been fun.
I'm glad.
Now I should interview you the same way.
I love it.
Somebody ought to do that for your podcast.
One of these days.
Mm-hmm.
One of these days.